So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar BCCC at the Web Summit in Rio. My name is Peter Hawkins, and I am co-chair at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce with Daniel Rosica. And I would like to thank our annual sponsors, Vale, Proactiva Results, 4B Mining, Brookfield, Lundin Mining, BMA Law, and Mellowhawk Logistics for their support. These organizations all keep us up and running. I would also like to note that in our virtual world, we still have our feet on the land. And I want to acknowledge that this land where I am is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe and Chippewa peoples, and home to the Métis and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And since this is a coast-to-coast event, I would also like to acknowledge that Fernanda, who is in the West Coast, is on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and Bernadeth is in the unceded territories of the Wabanaki, Dawnland Confederacy, the Wolastoqiyik, the Mi'kmaq, the Abenaki, and the Passamaquoddy. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. We pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Now, we are here today to present an overview of the Web Summit Rio conference that took place in Brazil on May 1st to May 4th. And before we start, I do want to introduce the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. We are an independent, not-for-profit association establishing connections between Brazil and Canada for over 50 years. We're celebrating 50 years now, strengthening bilateral trade and investment relations and facilitating the exchange of experiences in both the private and public sectors. For more information about the BCCC and upcoming events, please follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter via the website brazcanchamber.org, brazcanchamber.org. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for this particular section. So in our beautiful East Coast, we have Bernadeth Fernandes. And Bernadeth is the founder and CEO of the Veranda Network and co-chair with Peter Shaw of our BCCC Atlantic chapter. And Bernadeth is a matchmaker extraordinaire and has been recognized as one of 2023's most inspiring immigrants. She's a top 25 most powerful woman in business, and she is shortlisted for the top 25 immigrants in Canada. So get your votes out. I think you can still vote for that. So you got to get in there. And then in our beautiful West Coast, we have Fernanda Whitaker, who is Director of Partnerships at Innovate BC, and she is co-chair with Ingrid Polini of the BCCC British Columbia chapter. Fernanda has a long history of international trade experience as a trade commissioner, specializing in IST, and as a business developer, program manager, and producer with tech festivals in Brazil and Canada. And as far as I'm concerned, she is an IST business expert. And so we're really glad she went to this event. And then completing our international field is BCCC member Richard Freund, who is co-founder and CEO at Conquer. And Conquer is a unique tech company that operates in the mining sector and uses naturally occurring muons rays to determine the stability of large masses like ore piles and tailings dams. His technology is timely and effective, and he is currently marketing his company. So what he has to say and his observations at the event will be worthwhile as well. So welcome all. And I hope that we have some insights from the three of you based on your attendance at Web Summit that we can share with our members. And of course, my goal is to encourage people to go to future events. So let's hope, by the time we're done, that's what you guys are thinking as well. So I want to start with Fernanda. Fernanda, would you be able to lay the scene for us? Like, what did you expect? Why did you think it was important to go? What were your expectations? Could you share that with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I'm still morning here, so good morning, bon dia, bonjour, tout le monde. So before I start, I just want to provide a little bit of context and background on the Web Summit. I would assume most of you know the Web Summit as an organization, and their flagship event is the Web Summit that takes place every November in Lisbon. And in addition to that event, they also organize a few other conferences around the world, like Collision in Toronto and Rise in Asia. So in response to a very high demand for travel and in-person gatherings post-COVID, post-pandemic, the organization wanted to expand and host another event. There was a call for applications, and they've chosen Rio as the first ever Web Summit outside of Europe. And they've chosen Rio not only because it is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, which it is, it's absolutely stunning, but also because Brazil is the ninth largest economy, and Brazil is really a very, very thriving, it has a thriving startup ecosystem. It's growing really fast. It's been attracting so much interest from corporate and venture capital from around the world. Actually, in 2021, it's seen an amazing increase. I think there was threefold increase over the previous year in terms of influx of venture capital into Brazil. And they had several rounds of seeds and from seed to Series G investment in Brazilian startups. So really, really very, very busy, innovative, and promising startup ecosystem. And so it's a perfect setting for Web Summit. Web Summit was the largest, it is now the largest tech event in Brazil. It was sold out. So we had about 21,000 people attending the event in Rio. Very large representation from women. I think 40% of participants were women. And I was also very, very impressed with the numbers of startups and investors. We had about 1,000 startups attending and about 500 investors. So for every 2 startups, there was an investor there looking for, connecting and finding the next big thing in Brazil. The event also had about 40 speakers. I tried to find a number of sessions. I couldn't, but I know it was more than 100 hours of talks, master classes, roundtables, networking events. So really, really busy. In terms of the logistics and how the event was organized, the event took place at Rio Centro, which is the largest, according to the website, the largest exhibition center in Latin America. And it is pretty impressive. It's pretty good, very, very good infrastructure. It is located a little bit outside of the city center. So if you are in the most well-known places and regions in Rio, like Copacabana or Ipanema, you would have to plan about an hour to get there. There's always lots of traffic in Rio, so it's a little bit far out, but at the same time, it's pretty big, it is large. They do need the space to build such a versatile infrastructure to host large conferences. So it is really it was really, really good, well organized. They had 2 large pavilions for exhibition. So about 150, more than 150 exhibitors in those 2 large pavilions. And they also had 5 stages scattered around those 2 pavilions. So in addition to the booths and exhibitors, they also had some sessions happening within the 2 pavilions. They also had a very large amphitheater that seats about 3,000 people. And that was the main stage or the center stage. And that's where most of the keynote speakers and most of the sessions were held. What else do I need? Oh, I wanted to mention, I have a note about food, Peter, because you gotta eat, right? And that was impressive. I thought it was really well organized, because in other events I attended, including Collision last year, I thought it was so many lineups for food. So they did a wonderful job in having food trucks and concessions and all organized in the gardens outside of the pavilion. So it was not only easy, there was lots of options and not many lineups. So you didn't feel like in a crowded space. So it was really, really good. So I will close with my expectations. So with my Innovate BC hat, as Peter mentioned, I'm the Director of Partnerships at Innovate BC. With that hat, I was really hoping and looking forward to networking and meeting like-minded people and especially other organizations that support entrepreneurship and acceleration, startup acceleration from other jurisdictions from Brazil, not only Brazil, but abroad. And I did meet lots of other organizations from other countries that support and have public policies and programs that support entrepreneurship. And with my BCCC hat, I was really hoping to increase awareness about Canada and specifically about BC, our ecosystem here, and spread the word that, you know, this is a very welcoming startup ecosystem in Canada and in BC, and it's a very great place for, you know, startups that are looking at expansion or international presence to consider as a landing pad to, you know, do business in the US, or in our case here in BC, business in Asia. So that was my expectation and that's what I was looking for attending this.
All right, and so I'm going to ask you a bold question right off the bat. Did you find what you were looking for?
Absolutely. Yes, it was really, really good to meet, as I mentioned, organizations from so many other countries. I was actually expecting to find more Brazilian organizations, but I was surprised. I met people from not only Latin America, Chile, Uruguay, but lots of organizations from Europe, France, Portugal, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden. So many organizations from Europe. That was really rich for me. I expanded my network of contacts. It was really check box.
Okay, great to hear. So I want to switch over just to Bernadette. So Bernadette, you know, tell us, why did you think it was important to attend, and in light of what you do, and I believe this was your first time to Brazil. So let's hear your first impressions.
Yeah, so for me, it was really important that I attend and that I visit Brazil, because I had put it on my bucket list as a country that I really wanted to visit back in 2013. So exactly 10 years ago, and I still hadn't gotten there. And sometimes, you know, it's cost prohibitive for us to travel to all the wonderful places around the world that we want to travel to. So when I always attend when I can, of course, but I have been able to attend Web Summit in Portugal since 2018, except for during the pandemic. We had 2 years of virtual sessions. The third year was hybrid, so they knocked the numbers down. They capped it at 42,000. Yeah, so I've been able to attend. I've been able to attend Collision in Canada as well since 2019. So for me, when it was announced that Web Summit was going to go off the continent for the first time and selected Brazil, I can't tell you, like, my joy and excitement over being able to potentially go. And long story short, I broke my foot in January, and I thought that my dreams were shattered. But in fact, I worked really hard and decided that I was going to go anyway. That's how much I wanted to go. So it was so important to me personally, but professionally as well. And so for me, I always look to Canada and to where we have maybe not official trade agreements, but certainly where we have relations, and relations are good. And I always saw Brazil as a place where we like to do business and vice versa. Brazil loves doing business with Canada as well. And I thought, well, I'm an economic developer. I incorporated my business in Canada, 10 years ago, or 10 years ago exactly. No, 2011. So 12 years ago. And I thought, well, what do? I look for opportunities to do trade between two countries or two regions. I look for opportunities to attract investment, whether it would be companies or whether it would be individuals that are, highly talented and educated. And Brazil meets those criteria for me. And so I looked at, outside of mining, which is really one of the key industries that we both have synergies in, I looked at things that were on my radar because of projects that I'm working with. So the bioscience sector was really important. The agribusiness sector was really important. And the and the energy, specifically in renewable energies, because of course the oil and gas is, you know, an old staple, as they call it in sectors, but we wanted to move really beyond that and address things that are more climate friendly. And so those three sectors I thought would keep me really busy. So that's why it was kind of important to me on both levels, and I'm so glad I went. Yeah, so.
And give us some first impressions of Brazil.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, like Brazil just they overshot for me, because I had my own expectations, as we all do when we travel somewhere new. For me, I was, you know, we had heard all kinds of things in the news, especially in the recent years. And so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I was a little bit fearful. But in the past, you know, few years, we've had a real influx of Brazilian entrepreneurs, Brazilian students, especially in Atlantic Canada, where I live. And everybody I met, we were just so in love with each other. We just love having opportunities to collaborate, but not only like break bread in business, but break bread literally. And so we were getting together for dinners and churrascos or barbecues. And for me, like, it just gave me even more reason. And so I had mixed emotions. I thought, what am I going to get? Am I going to see poverty? Am I going to see, you know, crime? Because those were the things that were the negative that were coming to the surface in the news and whatnot. And I saw none of that. And in fact, I saw so much beauty. Like Fernanda mentioned, it's a beautiful country. I didn't even want to leave, to tell you the truth. Broken foot or not, I didn't even care. I was hobbling along and just making sure I maximized on everything, including staying out until, 3 in the morning. And so, yeah, for me, it was the food was fantastic. I even like it better than Portuguese food from Portugal now, which is saying a lot. And the people were the highlight, absolutely the most wonderful level of service and kindness and thoughtfulness. I loved every bit of it.
Wonderful. I'm curious to now talking specifically about the Web Summit itself. Themes. What were some prevailing themes that you saw?
Well, I think I saw the same themes that everybody saw, because you couldn't help, miss, the the importance of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. And basically, it's a technology conference. So everything that has technology as a foundation, which is basically every sector these days, including agriculture or agribusiness, ag tech is very big, so for me, mining, of course, is always big in Brazil. The themes were just what I was mostly that stood out for me, besides the artificial intelligence, was really things like climate change and the importance of making sure that we honor the climate agreements that we have. And I think the highlight for me in terms of the themes was that we had a young woman from the Amazon that was really tugging at her heartstrings in terms of how important the message around climate change was, and how it's now, it's not in 5 years or 10 years, it's now, and we have to it's all hands on deck. For me, that was a big theme that resonated throughout all the pavilions, really. And yeah, and I think that there's so much synergy between what goes on in education between both countries. And for me personally, it was around Indigenous rights. And it's a very emotional topic for me, but I think, thank you for doing the land acknowledgement first and foremost, Peter, but, it goes beyond that too. Like, we really have to live, not just talk the talk, but walk the talk. And this young lady was walking the talk, and we were all listening, as far as I could tell. And for me, I just immediately drew parallels to Canada and our Indigenous communities and the challenges that those communities face, and how the onus is on all of us to step up together.
Well, thank you for that, Bernadette. You know, the BCCC is going to be doing a webinar on Indigenous issues in both countries too, and we actually have developed that with Dave Owens, our co-chair in Manitoba. So looking forward to seeing more down that vein. And you did hit on a very important issue. I mean, nothing, if we can't resolve the climate crisis, you know, what do we have left? That's all we are going to live in the ground. I don't know. But I want to ask Fernanda one more question, then I'm going to bring in Richard. Fernanda, the themes that you saw, which ones do you think are the ones we could capitalize on? I know we didn't discuss this in advance because yes, we do pre-calls, but I'm just thinking, like, did you see some themes coming out that are ones that could really be developed? Was there anything special that you saw there?
Well, I think very much along the lines of what Bernadette described. I think technologies that have applications to solve the big issues, climate change and decarbonization. I think those are very, very relevant, and there's a lot going on in Brazil and in Canada to advance those technologies. I was particularly interested in hoping I would hear more on agriculture. You know, considering Brazil is, as I think, the fourth or one of the largest countries with, you know, agricultural lands. I would like to see more of the discussion of how the technology is being applied to agriculture. I know with sensors and drones and robots, you know, the precision agriculture, there's so much going on already, and it would be interesting to see kind of the next phase for artificial intelligence and generative AI on how that can be applied to agriculture. But I think overall for me, Peter, you know, I think the world is getting really confusing. And, you know, in the past, I've been going to conferences for 20 years. In the past, you would go to a conference and you would find answers. Now I go to a conference and I get out with more questions that I started, because there's just so many ideas, especially with AI and with cryptocurrency, you know, so many different ideas are so divergence, and you know, it depends on who is on the stage. You can hear so many different views on ethics and applications, and so it don't get me wrong, it's still valid and really interesting because you get different perspectives. But yeah, I think it's a lot of work that we have to do, you know, our own to try to find what the answers and try to see how that applies to your scenario and your business and your country and advancing the economies in your own region or jurisdictions.
You've really hit on something key here, and that is how technology actually is the great equalizer on so many levels. It is on the environment, it is in finance, it is in health, it's in everything else. And it is in a real company that everybody has a company, but with Richard, he has a technology company with real live applications. So Richard, can you tell us a little bit about your company? And then I'm going to ask you some questions about why you thought this was valuable to go to this event.
Sure. Perfect. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here. And before I go into answering your question, Peter, I just want to comment on what Fernanda just said, that before she was going to conferences to finances, and now she's going to conferences, and she's right, the answers are not like they're as easily laid out because the problems became more complex. So what I feel is that when we go now to conferences, we find co-seekers, we find kind of people that strive towards the same goal, the same direction. So we kind of have to huddle up in a way to figure out our own answers. And it's gotten harder, of course. Yeah, that's totally true. So that said, I'm the CEO of Conquer & Conquer, a Brazilian-Canadian mining and mineral startup that works with cosmic radiation. So we use cosmic rays to validate the safety of tailings dams, or the safety within the entire mining process. So we are sustainable. We bring a new technology to the mining sector. We try to make it as green as possible with this technology in its specific applicabilities and applications. It's very exciting and very hard because it's new, and it's something that, of course, the mining sector has to adapt to, has to validate, and has to be sure that it's working, and that they can really lock into this technology. But luckily, we are on our path. So I've just continue talking. So about the Web Summit, I like going to these conferences because still there are places where intelligent people get together and share their knowledge and share their stuff. So, and that's also a place where I found BCCC in the past. So I'm very excited of going to conferences. And then I went to Collision in Toronto last year, and there I heard that there would be the first Web Summit in Rio. And as it was something that was totally doable, then I applied for a ticket just to go. And a couple of months before the event, somebody from the organization called me up and he said, "Don't you want to be an exhibitor?" I said, "Yeah, sure, but isn't that totally expensive?" And he goes, "No, what you paid, I give you 2 more tickets, and it's pretty much that. It's for us." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do that." And the next thing I know is he sent me a list of like 5 topics of making a 3-minute pitch, a 2-minute pitch, a 40-word pitch, a video pitch, a sustainable pitch. And I was like, okay, so let's go through all that stuff. So I did that. I did all the pitches. I sent them in. I submitted all that. And I didn't really know how that would sink into the entire concept. And I was really, really positively surprised when we were chosen to compete for one of the Meet the Drapers spot. So Meet the Drapers, I didn't know Meet the Drapers. I know Shark Tank, and I didn't know Meet the Drapers. But Meet the Drapers is like Mr. Draper is a Bitcoin entrepreneur. And also there's another thing about mining. When you go, you say a mining company, you have to be sure to make sure that it's not a Bitcoin mining company, because as there's so many Bitcoin people talking, they go like, "Oh, you're mining. Oh, you're green mining. Oh, that's cool because my Bitcoins." I go, "It's not Bitcoins. It's the real thing, the mine and mineral stuff." And another thing is we were like the only mining and mineral startup that was present at the Web Summit. So there's a big space even for the mining companies or for this market to go. And that may even be the reason that, like you said, Fernanda, for every 2 startups, there was 1 investor. For us, there hasn't been so far. We are still looking for that. So going back to the Drapers, so it's like an investment show. So you pitch and you run for $1 million in the end if you win in the finals. And they chose out of the 1,000 startups, they chose 200. And out of the 200, they chose Conquer. And Conquer went all the way up to the top 4%. So we were in the last 8, and unfortunately we dropped out in the last round. So only 4 were pitching, and we were like pre-pitching. But that's still a totally really good result for us. And afterwards, the Meet the Drapers people, they told us that even though we didn't make it to the finals at that point, but they are always revalidating the finalists and everything. So we are hopeful that in the future we still get a chance to pitch for Mr. Draper.
I think it's so interesting too that when you just pointed out how big the sector is that is untapped in terms of mining, real mining versus the cryptocurrency. And I think there's lots of potential for other organizations coming. And I also think that your technology is so cool that imagine going from 200 to the top 8. I'm, very impressive. Congratulations. And and you must have been selling it like crazy, which is wonderful.
Yeah, because it was something we didn't even expect. Because as I told you, I was going as a participant, and then they kind of put me into that program where I had all the possibilities, and all of a sudden they come up and go, "Well, you're competing for the Drapers." I go, "Wow, that's great." So yeah, I'm really, really excited about that. It's really, really a good achievement. Yeah, thank you.
Richard, what would you give for a tip for future somebody in your position who is got a startup, is looking for some funding, has got a great project? Well, if you're sending somebody to Web Summit, what would they do? What's the best thing they could do?
Yeah, pitch a lot. Have like your pitch, even though it's sometimes you go, "Okay, I have to pitch again," but it's the message, and the more you pitch, the sharper your pitch gets, and the better you start pitching, and the faster you grasp what people are looking for. So we were walking the floor also, and there were some investors, and they were also exposing, because at these events, like 80% is selling and 20% or less is buying. So it's really, it's unlevel, because like everybody wants to sell something to somebody else. But still, when we were talking to some venture capitalist companies, quickly we got to people that are like interested in mining. So there are a few, but you find them. So the sharper you pitch, the faster you go.
Wonderful. No, good tip. Good tip. The more the more you do it, the better. Bernadette, I'm wondering too, in terms of your making connections, did you spot any cool? I know I'm throwing you on the spot here too, but did you spot any cool technologies? Anything cool that you thought, wow?
Well, she met me.
She met you.
I was actually going to say that probably one of the most exciting companies, and it had nothing to do with you, Richard, because I had not met you, but one of the most exciting companies was Concur. And just to see that level of sustainability, it's really disruptive to what we've had in a very traditional mining sector. So for me, like Richard, I'm sorry to maybe put you on the spot or embarrass you, but you were really the highlight for me. And like I see now, there is so much where we can collaborate between these two countries, between Brazil and Canada on many sectors, but in mining specifically, like collaboration is what gets us to innovation quicker and better. And so for me, because I work under a methodology of the triple helix model of innovation, that means that I'm looking for, at any conference I go to, I'm looking for simultaneous collaboration between governments, industry, academia. So for me, if I go to Web Summit and Switzerland is there and they have something that I see a potential for collaboration, yeah, I'm going to go after them. And with you, Richard, I think that the opportunity is real, even if we're talking about investment. So, I mean, imagine like you go to a conference, there are two companies per investor, as Fernanda pointed out. But like we're all competing, all those startups are competing for the same share of wallet. But then imagine, Richard, that you're in Canada, you're at Collision, and we kind of hone in on the investors that are looking at mining, and we just go right after them. Because with the Web Summit app, for example, you have access to that. You can do searches. I love the Web Summit app. Out of Web Summit, the content is consistent throughout every Web Summit they do. They've been doing it since 2010, and albeit they started in Dublin, and it was very specific to technologists in the Dublin area, it grew very quickly. But you can basically get any type of investor interest. And if you focus in on that, I think that you can really get some share of that wallet. So I forget what your question was. I got excited about Concur, and sorry, I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot, but I really do think that the opportunity starts within BCCC, and we're all here today. And I think maybe that's one of the things that we should start looking at for you.
Yep, fantastic. It's something else. I'm looking at the people who are watching here, and we have the Canada's Trade Commissioner Service too, because we have Anna Sudo is there. We have Claudia Penaloza, who is the Director of Latin America Partnerships with the province of Ontario. She's a very sharp cookie. Everybody should be friends with her. And John Welch is here. I see Henrique Correa. Henrique is actually pointing out that the Brazilian consulate in Vancouver is going to be promoting their guide to exporting into Western Canada. And it's an in-person event on May 30th. So Henrique, go ahead and put that in the public chat and the details too, okay? They're happy to share it with everybody. In the meantime, Fernanda, I'm curious, and it's probably not the thing to ask, but what did they do wrong? What was the, maybe not the disappointment, but what was something that you would like to see them do better next time?
Well, I think there's if anyone that is in the audience was there, or if you've heard, I think the first day, the opening night, there was lots of upset people, because I think it was the first day. It's a huge event, and I think it was not planned accordingly for the expected number of attendees for the first night. They kind of underestimated there. So there's lots of people that were not able to go inside and actually attend and watch the opening session. So, but that was just the first day, the opening night. The following day, everything was really well organized, and I think they're just learning from what happened the first night. So that was it's kind of expected for a large event, or an event of that size. One other thing that I would point out, and that is my personal opinion, I think the sessions, but that's a trend everywhere. I've seen that at Collision, in South by Southwest. The sessions are short. The sessions were 20 minutes in the main stage. And in my opinion, it's just, you know, by the time you get to know the speakers and what they do, kind of their expertise, the session is over. So it's not enough time to go to dive deep into the subject. So it's kind of more like, you know, strokes of, you know, it was really interesting. And they did offer roundtables and master classes, which are longer and more in-depth sessions, but they were on a first come first served basis, and there's lots of people, and it was really hard to get into those sessions. So that's kind of also a tip or suggestion if you're planning and attending a large conference like this in the future. Really spend time looking at the schedule beforehand, and try to select what are the 2 or 3 top things that I absolutely want to see, and prepare for those and be there in advance, because there are lineups outside of the session half an hour before the session starts, 45 minutes before the session starts. There's already people lining up outside. So, and that was the same. It's not only Web Summit. I've seen this happening in other conferences. So it is very hard. You shouldn't plan to go, you know, to sessions like subsequent sessions. It is really hard because they're happening in different locations. And by the time you get there, the room is full. So that's kind of my tip also. Just really select, be more, you know, spend time, and what are the ones that I absolutely want to see, and prepare for those. Be there in advance, line up, because yeah, there's
and I think when you talk about preparing in advance, you said to use the app for those, setting up those meetings in advance too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, Bernadette's experience too. And we don't only, we have the app in advance, right? So as soon as you register, you have access to the app. So you already have you have everything there on your hands, you know who will be there, sessions, the time, and you can actually connect to people in advance. So that's the other thing. Just take the time and, put the effort in, searching, finding out who's going to be there, and identifying contacts that you would like to meet, and reach out through the app before the event, so you can optimize your time there, and even after the event, right? Bernadette, I think you were talking about that, as you can.
Yeah, I think, well, exactly what you said, that for the scheduling of sessions, I think it's absolutely brilliant, because you can coordinate, you can own your own schedule, you can build your own schedule, and that keeps you from, rushing from one to another. You'll know that if you have 2 sessions, well, you're going to have to wait for the recording maybe. So pick your sessions wisely and schedule it accordingly, give yourself enough time. But for meeting the people, I think it's brilliant. Because you really can, set up those appointments even before you get there. And the only downside to the people component of the app is that not everyone uses it. So if you're looking to meet the Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, which I did happen to meet purely by accident, but if you're looking to meet him, he's likely not going to be on the app. Like, he'll be there, his name will be there, but you'll be disappointed if you try to schedule a meeting with him. But what I most love about the app is that it's good until the next Web Summit Rio. So basically a year. And, sales at this level do not happen at the event itself. So if you're looking to sell a product or make a deep connection, you're going to have a whole year to do it, and you're going to need it, because a lot happens, handshakes and kisses in Brazil and Rio. A lot of that happens at the event, but you need more than that. You need more depth, and you're going to be able to use it with Web Summit. You're actually going to be able to develop those relationships.
It's funny because I coined the phrase "bad boyfriend syndrome," where you go down, you have a great time, and then you leave and you don't call. And the
Yeah.
fact is, as you said, all the business happens after. All the business happens after. We have a very interesting question from Rosa Cristina Aguilar, who was, Richard, she was pointing out that you said the event was like 20/80 selling buying, and she represents a consulting firm, and just wondering if Brazil or the innovation tech sector at all is looking for corporate training, and if so, what specific areas? And so, Richard, is that something that you would have benefited from?
Corporate training,
in selling and
good.
marketing, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always, of course, it's always good taking into account the specificities of the market, of course. Yeah, but it's not like a sales 101 in itself. It's always, what do you sell to whom and what kind of market and what kind of dynamics, if it's something that's innovative, if it's disruptive, if it's something that's already proven. So, but it's always important to go into that. So also one of the things that you ask money for is always sales and marketing. So yes,
Yeah.
the answer is yes.
And of course, Bernadeth does that, and many of our members, too. Paula Sad at Mandala Group does it, to our past president, and it is very, very necessary. In fact, I will throw something else at you. Everybody who is going to shop or sell at a different country in a different culture must get that coaching to understand the market. If you don't do it, you fail. If you don't do it, you fail.
Yeah. And we are blessed in Canada to have the Trade Commissioner Service and 160. I know, Fernanda, maybe you were going to say the same thing. At 160 locations around the world, so pretty much everywhere. And Brazil, they had a great presence. They were hands-on. They must have been exhausted. Claudia specifically, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how wonderful they are. And really, it's a service that is provided, like unlike any other country in the world. They provide it for free. And it's really like hands-on, like anything that you need to understand the market where you're going, because it's new to us. And like, for me, I'd never been. So I really needed to understand what goes on. How do you do business? Is it on the back of a napkin? Like, we do in New Brunswick where I live? Or is it, a handshake? Or is it more ceremonial? Like,
Yeah, I was going to mention that, Bernadette, of course, because that is such a wonderful service. As a former trade commissioner in Brazil, that's a wonderful service, and the consulate in Rio and in São Paulo joined forces. They had a booth. I should have mentioned early on, but that was very, very important. And it worked as a meeting point for the Canadian delegation to meet and have meetings, and it was really, really important to have that presence, to show Canada, to put Canada in the map. So, everyone from Brazil and other attendees from other parts of the world see the collaboration, the work, the business, the support the Canadian government provides to bilateral trade. So it was really great. And not only having the physical presence and the booth at the show, but also bringing the delegation together. So we had a welcome breakfast in the morning before on the first day before the conference started, so the delegates could meet each other. And it was really interesting. I'm not sure, I don't remember who exactly said that, but they said it's one of the highlights of attending a trade show abroad, and which is supported by TCS, is meeting other Canadian delegates, because that shows who in Canada is really serious about international business, who takes the time, who really is, going and attending these conferences. So that networking and the, meeting other delegates, it's so valuable. Sometimes you have to go to Brazil to meet someone that is not just next door to you and doing business, and you just realize there's so much in common, and you make excellent and fruitful connections. So kudos to the Trade Commissioner Service. And
absolutely, I can't stress how invaluable the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service is. But I will also draw your attention to that there is the Brazilian consulate, and the consulate in Toronto, consulate in Vancouver, and the consulate in Montreal are all tremendously helpful as well and very interested. I see Luis Evangelista here as a consul in Toronto, and so great to have him on here too, because you have to remember it goes both ways, and so you need to make sure you have those connections both ways. And making friends and making those connections are just as important as your technology, because no one's going to buy it. No one's going to buy it if they don't know you. That's all there is to it. I actually am going to change the subject a little bit now, and that is we had a second event in Sao Paulo, and Bernadeth and Fernanda attended a very interesting event with Canada's Chief Trade Chief Trade Negotiator, Sarah Wilshaw, was in Sao Paulo, and a special event was hosted. And so perhaps Bernadeth, can you give the lay of the land for that one too? So tell us what the event was, first of all, and then I'll get Bernadette's comments.
Yeah, so gosh, now I don't remember the title because it's been a couple of weeks, and I'm old, so I can't remember exactly, but it was a group of women in trade. So is that correct, Fernanda?
Yep.
And we were speaking to this group that was arranged by the Chamber of Commerce between Canada and Brazil, CCBC,
Yep.
in Sao Paulo. And for me, like, it was so exciting to have both chambers, our chamber, the Brazil Canada Chamber of Commerce, and their chamber collaborating. I don't know, maybe for the first time, like in a, personal kind of, no, maybe.
Nope.
No. Okay. So, but for me, let's say it was my first time where we're actually in the same room together. It was so generous of them to invite us, and of course, it was generous of you, Peter, to give us the opportunity, to me and Fernanda, to go and represent. And I just loved being in that beautiful boardroom, audiovisual room, like technology galore, with all those amazing women. And I think I'd mentioned to you, Peter, that the highlight of the folks that were there, we had a city councillor from Sao Paulo that attended this event just so that she could make sure that we knew that she was representing women in trade at the table in the council chambers. And I thought that was pretty exciting to have her there. But we talked about diversity and equity and inclusion. And what I've learned is that it's those things are important to all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're a developed country or a developing country or emerging country. Really, women are women everywhere, and it goes beyond women. It's not just about women. Sometimes it's also about new genders that we have introduced, and non-binary people as well. And so to me, it became just very inclusive, very important to hear everyone talk. Of course, Chief Trade Commissioner Sarah was there as well. We also had the Consul General, which is the highest serving diplomatic position in Sao Paulo, or anywhere really, but we had Dr. Heather Cameron. And for Dr. Heather Cameron and I, like, we've been following each other on LinkedIn for years. And this was the first time I actually recognized her from her photo. Went up to her and I said, "I'm Bernadette." And she was so excited. And afterwards we had breakfast. We arranged our breakfast the next day. So for me, it was very powerful. We talked a lot about again, the relationship and the issues that really plague us everywhere, regardless of where you are. And I would invite Fernanda to speak, as she speaks more eloquently and probably remembers more about the event than I do.
No, I think that was really, really, I think, a good summary. I was just going to compliment. Yes, the facilities were impressive. That's the arbitrage center, and it's very impressive. It was an intimate meeting. It was not a very large event. I would say there are about 15 people in the room, right, Bernadette? It was 15 to 20 people, so very small. Mm-hmm. Intimate. And for me, was what kind of the highlight was really kind of noticing how the speakers and more specifically the chief senior trade commissioner and there was a speaker from Brazil and a guest which is Monica Ximenez, very well-known entrepreneur in Brazil. and kind of how they shared their personal views and their personal history and how that impacts their, like the way they do business today, and the way that they position themselves as leader women in their respective fields and in respective arenas, and how that background, how the history plays such an important role. And when you share that, you make yourself vulnerable, but at the same time, you open that channel to so much more, and for connecting at a deeper level. And it was really interesting at the end of this session, the Chamber of Commerce, the president was actually the only male in the room, and at the end he noticed the same thing. That was kind of his takeaway, is how women tend to share more about their personal backgrounds, and he actually shared a beautiful story about his personal background, and that for me changed even my view and how I view him. And so it was really interesting. It was a beautiful event.
Oh, I'm so glad. And just one clarification. So the Global Affairs, BCCC, and CCBC were the sponsors of that event, just to let everybody know. So now what's so interesting for me, because I did watch it online, was hearing the positive feminist trade policy that Canada is putting forward, and seeing how receptive the Brazilians were to it. I mean, that I think is really something that we should be very proud of, and something that I think people forget, that it is an integral touchstone of our national trade and investment policy. So I thought that was interesting. And then what else I thought was very interesting too was, for every Canadian there was a Brazilian equivalent who was also leading. And I thought that was very interesting and very telling, because you have to remember, way more people, they have a much harder job. And seeing that was just almost moving for me. And I'm really glad you guys made the connections, because that's so important all the time. It really is. Anyway, what I guess what I'm looking for now is if you can give us sort of just a summary of your overall impression of your trip. And so, Web Summit, would you do it again? Would you do something differently? Would you make the effort, because you all had to get up at the crack of dawn to go over to São Paulo to do that? Fernanda, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for me, it was 100% worth it. I did get the connections I was hoping I would get. Lots of good contacts, and I've already had follow-up meetings with actually two of the people I met there. Again, next time I would just, as I mentioned, I didn't spend too much time on the sessions. It was more like walking the show and meeting people and trying to find organizations that have similar mandate, and that we could share best practices. And I would love to kind of learn more from other experiences around the world on how to support entrepreneurship, how to support the acceleration of startups. So that was really helpful. I think for next time, I would just plan a little bit more for the sessions, just trying to be there. I really wanted to get into some of those roundtables, and they were full. So just trying to be there early. But yeah, I would definitely go again. I think it's, and always trying to connect to with the chamber, with the trade commissioner service in advance, to try to identify if there are additional events that are being planned for the Canadian delegations, or vice versa, if you're coming from Brazil to Canada, really reaching out to the chamber here in Canada or in Brazil, and trying to find out if there's a delegation going, what other additional events or activities are happening, because those are very, very valuable. There, you won't find them in the website, in the Web Summit website, but you will find out if you reach out to the chamber, to us at BCCC, and if there's an international delegation we are aware of, we can make that connection, and I think that makes it so much more productive and fruitful. Mute, Peter, mute.
I know better than that. Whoops. Richard, I'm going to give you a chance to comment, then I'm going to give Bernadette the last word. So, Richard, you've done it once. Would you do it again?
Of course, totally. Yes, I would do it again, and I would not go in as just like a participant. I want to be a protagonist again. This is such a rich experience, and not just for me. I was thinking while Fernanda was talking. It's also for my team. I mean, I took a couple of people with me, and I realized how they grew, how they strove for speaking out the message, how they had the opportunity to talk to other people and to convince and to see and to do like the product market fit kind of thing, to see if what we have is really what the market needs. And I would like them to be more in the pitching role as well, so I can also focus on more strategic stuff, like doing all this homework, this pre-homework with all the commissions and everything that is coming, and to also see the session, so that I'm not that much into the operational part involved with the operations. And of course I want to win the Drapers, but that's something else. So yes, I would do it again. I don't know if I would go for the same quota or maybe a quota that's a bit higher than that, but it is totally it's a very rich experience, and it's recommendable to do it, and I recommend it even to myself. So yes, I will totally do it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Bernadette, are you on side with everybody else?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And in fact, I think I'm just waiting for the ticket sales to open, and I'll be buying my ticket, because it was one of the best experiences. And like I said, comparing it to, I've been going to Portugal since 2018, and yes, of course, like even some of the mistakes that were made, when you think about in Portugal in 2014, no, so I guess it was still in Dublin, but in 2014, so they had been doing this for 4 years, and they had a Wi-Fi problem that knocked them off their feet. And the year prior, they had Elon Musk speaking. So, I mean, this was like getting to be a big event. And for them to have that Wi-Fi nightmare was probably the catalyst for them going to Lisbon in 2016. And so it happens, like, so the audio visual, yes, they weren't perfect on the opening night, but I think that we could overcome that and overlook that, especially considering that Portugal, which now has over 70,000 attendees, 70. I think we can now see that there is an opportunity for all of us to rise to that level, as long as the facility can accommodate us. And I would say, in addition to buying tickets right away, I'd probably offer to, lead a delegation, not lead in the sense of, the services that the trade commissioners are going to offer, but to certainly like provide, some hands-on to some of the companies that from Canada would like to go. And vice versa, if Brazilian companies want to come to Canada to Collision, like, we're happy to do that. And I'm probably speaking for all of us, but sorry if I'm throwing you under the bus, but I think that we're all happy to provide that type of service because we're so passionate about it.
That's a bus apparently we're all happy to be under. So anyway, on behalf of the Chamber of the Brazil Canada Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank Bernadeth Fernandes and Fernanda Whitaker and Richard Freund for sharing their experiences and their thoughts with us today. Everybody should know that this webinar is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days. And I want you all to, don't forget to follow us on all our social media. I will advise you that we will be at Collision, and we will be hosting a cocktail on the 27th, and details to come. You have to follow our social media to find out what those are, because I don't know what they are, but I know I have to show up. And we will also be at Port St. John on May 30th and June 1st, May 30th, 31st, and June 1st. At their port days, where we are hosting some Brazilian companies and introducing Brazil to the Maritimes, and Web Summit Week Startup Week in Vancouver with Fernanda. I think that's June 6th. When is that, Fernanda?
Yes, it's June 6th in Vancouver.
Yes.
And I will also be attending the Brazilian consulate event that is in the chat. So it will be great to meet anyone in person on the 30th, May 30th.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So thank you all. We're very grateful. And that is it for us now. And please follow us and watch what happens next, because we've got a lot of things happening as we celebrate 50 years. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.